Welcome to Genuine Humans, exploring the stories behind the great marketing leaders of our time and hearing how their journeys have influenced the brands they've built. Brought to you by The Social Element, here are our hosts, Tamara Littleton, CEO and founder, and Wendy Christie, Chief People Officer.
Today is a very good day as Wendy and I are delighted to be joined by Lee McGuffie, Marketing and Digital Director at Virgin Red. Welcome, Lee.
Hi, Tamara. Hi, Wendy, and thanks for having me on a very sunny but very cold day in Manchester.
Hi, Lee. It's lovely to have you here.
Now, Lee, everyone knows the Virgin brand, but for those that don't know, can you explain Virgin Red?
Of course, I should be a dab hand at this now. So Virgin Red, in short, is effectively what we like to call the group company-wide rewards club, for want of a better term. So we've been building it for the last couple of years. We started with the launch of what we call Virgin Points last year, which is our currency for the program. At the end of last year, we launched the Virgin Red app into beta. And then the actual timing of this was to perfection because we opened the doors properly to this on Monday this week. So this podcast is very, very timely. That's probably why I look a little bit haggard as we do it. Thankfully, nobody can see that. And then what we've done, we've invited in the first batch of people who are Flying Club members. But anyone can join from today. And it's a tiny bit of background in this. So the members themselves can actually earn Virgin Points on everything from everyday spending with the likes of John Lewis to Octopus Energy, and of course the big Virgin company stuff such as Virgin Wines, Atlantic, Media. The thing that we're sort of trying to build through is that you can save these points up for incredible experiences such as first class travel with Virgin Atlantic, through to going to a gig at one of the Virgin Red private box we've got at Manchester AO Arena. But the thing is, it's just a start. So we're incredibly excited about what's in the pipeline for it. The type of partners we've got on board, and as well as the evolution of the app and website, is just the start. So it's our first venture into something we've been thinking about for many, many years now. So we're really excited.
That is so fantastic. And congratulations on the launch as well.
Thank you.
Now, Wendy and I love to kind of get under the skin of people and also find out about their journey. Now, I think it's fair to say you have not had the most traditional route into marketing. How did you get to where you are now? Could you tell us a bit about your journey?
Yeah, I'm going to try to make it really short. I guess the best place to start would be school. So I think where I started at school, I was pretty average at school, if I'm honest with you. Not that I wasn't academic, I just wasn't that applied into what I was doing. So I had an interesting sort of start where I left home just after I was 16, a big teenage rage and all that kind of stuff. And I left in a big blaze of glory and spent a number of sort of the best part of a year sort of bumming around friends' houses and parents putting me up and helping me get on. And I was doing things like shelf stacking in a local market. I was selling video games, secondhand video games. I was purchasing secondhand electricals from a secondhand store and selling it at a college to scrape money together. And I got myself a little bedsit. There is a point to all this. It will help sort of build up the picture. And what I managed to do is I managed to get myself through college. So managed to scrape myself through college. And whilst I was at college, I bought a pair of turntables. So this is in really early 90s. Bought a couple of turntables and started collecting vinyl. I really wanted to go to uni. So I managed to push myself through college, but I just didn't have the money to get there. So what I did was I took what I thought was going to be a year off to try and save some cash. It turned out to be 2 years because I needed 2 years to save the cash. And I ended up working in all sorts of places. The most famous one that I talk to about my friends is this horrible chicken factory I worked at, which sounds as bad as it says. And I just spent basically 2 years doing shift work. So 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night, doing all night shift work and just trying to get all the money together. I was working in a pub in the evening, so it's barely any time other than just trying to save cash. So it took me 2 years, finally managed to get there, and I got myself to Nottingham Uni, did 2 years there, and then I shot off to Middlesbrough Uni to turn it into an honours degree. Now, what I was studying was business admin. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I needed to do something which was going to give me a bit of a foothold. So It was business administration. I wasn't particularly interested in law or anything sort of, very focused. It was just business admin. So I studied that, and then managed to get myself through university, plugging away at the music at the same time. So that's at a point with the turntables, doing little gigs and getting sort of bigger and bigger with that and getting more adventurous and everything else. And then my first job out of university was as a research analyst. It was as bad as it sounds, a research analyst in Hull. Now, I've got nothing against Hull, but it wasn't where I imagined myself after university. So I was writing white papers for like Oracle and Microsoft. And I was sat behind a desk, no human contact, essentially, sat behind a desk, thinking, what am I doing? What's going on here? And I was quite technical, but I just couldn't, I just wasn't enjoying it for me. So I looked around and I thought I need to do something with lots of people. Really excited about doing lots of people. So I saw a job in Leeds, which was an account executive over an agency called Poulter Partners. So this was 2001, year before the dot-com bubble burst. So I landed this amazing job at Poulter Partners where nobody was over the age of 25. It was the early days of the dot-com bubble where there was dining tables that cost £150,000 and all this crazy stuff. You know, it was really, really crazy. I had no idea what I was getting into. And then the bubble burst. And it was just this incredibly bonkers experience where the table was then getting pulled out of the building in front of us and all this kind of stuff. And I was exposed to clients like Morrison's and MTV. And it was brilliant. So at this point, my DJing had taken off, which is where it starts to get a little bit interesting. The DJing started to take off. I started playing in clubs around the UK, nothing big. And I started a website called 4clubbers.net, which was, bear in mind, this is in the 90s. And it had a big bulletin boards, message boards. There was no social media back then or internet messaging. It was bulletin boards. We amassed thousands and thousands of followers on this message board just purely by accident. And the aim of the website was really to get into clubs for free. I'll be honest with you. That's what we built it for, to try and get into clubs for free. And it went really, really well. It was really, really good. And as a byproduct of that, I started getting asked by the big clubs if we'd host a second room in these clubs and say, bring all your followers from the website into our club and you'll get to DJ as well. So then that started to take off and we started to notice that we were getting bigger and bigger clubs. And the agency job took a second place to the DJing. So I was sort of doing that at the side. And then I got a residency in a big club in London. Then I found myself going backwards and forwards to London, spending more time there in London than I was in Leeds. So cue a crazy couple of years where I moved to London. I got signed by a record label, as weird as this sounds. Wow. I got signed by a record label. And then I found myself on the front cover of magazines like Mix Mag, all these kind of really bizarre things. And I was really lucky. I got to play music all over the world in clubs like Cream and Gatecrasher. For people who are old enough, they'll remember these names. The Ministry of Sound. I was in Ibiza all summer. And I was playing at festivals like Glastonbury and Creamfields. Wow. And another thing that happened, I also became a music editor at Mix Mag during this period as well because of knowledge of music. So it was this kind of really bizarre period where I was just getting into everything. Where there's a juncture on this, I then started to think to myself, this is not a sustainable career. You know, this is not something that, unless I become Pete Tong, which I had no chance of doing, this is not going to be a sustainable career. So I decided I wanted to quit by I was 30. So I made a pact. I'll quit by I was 30 and I'll focus back on the advertising career. So what I needed to do was 6 weeks before I was 30, I quit all of my gigs, quit everything, sold all of my records, sold everything I could, and just said, I'm going to focus on advertising. So I did this and I took a job at DDB, where I was an account director and working on Volkswagen. So just that interaction with individuals and people and everything else. It got really exciting. And then I took a job at AKQA, working on the Xbox account. So I was really lucky. I landed a lot of amazing roles. And then this agency called Dare came up. This is around 2005. They just won Vodafone and they needed an AD. So I met with these amazing folks called Mark Collier and John Owen, amazing individuals who just started the agency. And I had an amazing 5 years at Dare. They really looked after me. At the end of the 5 years, they needed somebody to move to New York to help them to open an agency in New York. So I jumped at the chance. I moved to New York in 2009, lived in Manhattan, had this apartment on 51st and 7, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, living the dream.
I was really lonely. I was really, really lonely. My friends had sort of, my friends went over there, they'd started families and everything else. So I found myself sort of thinking, maybe I should have done this a lot earlier. So I got a call from some friends in London who were starting a little ad agency, a little production agency. And they needed somebody who had some business nous. And apparently they thought that was me. So they asked me to come back from New York. I jumped at the chance. I came across, we started this thing called Parata, and we built a little business up to 30 people. And then we sold it into Work Club, an agency called Work Club, around 2013. We then subsequently sold it into Havas, and I didn't stay for any of that bit. I just thought I'll take some time out. It was a brilliant experience. It wasn't all plain sailing. We made lots of mistakes with that little agency, but it turned out okay. So I took some time off. My now wife, Sarah, we went. We sort of had a little bit of work. What's next? And then M&C Saatchi came calling, and I thought, am I going to go to a big network agency? This is going to be very weird. But I did. It was an incredible individual called Lisa Thomas, who was the CEO of M&T Saatchi, said, we're looking to start a production unit at M&T Saatchi. So we started that, built it to 70 people, really successful. And then I went to Japan with my wife for a 3-week holiday. And we're in Japan. And I said to Sarah, what should we do? What's the plan? And Sarah said, let's take a bit of a break. So anyway, by the end of the break, the 3-week break, we decided we were going to quit work, both of us. So we got back on Saturday to London, handed my notice on Monday, to an amazed Lisa Thomas and Christian Person, my boss. I said, I'm going to take a year off. I'm having a midlife crisis. I'm going to take a year off. So we took a year off and we traveled the world. So we quit in September, and by Christmas Day in December, we were at base camp at Everest in Nepal. So, we decided to take a break, really sort of get some distance between everything. We just spent a year traveling around the world. I had an amazing year, chased the sun for a year. And I came back to M&T Saatchi. They asked me to come back. So it's near the end of the story. And when I came back to M&T Saatchi, about 4 or 5 months later, Lisa Thomas said to me, Lee, I know I asked you to come back, but I'm off. I'm going to Virgin. I've got an incredible job at Virgin. So I was like, oh, right, what am I going to do? So long story short, I then found myself at Virgin. Lisa asked me would I come and join as the content and strategy director at the family office for Virgin, where I spent 2.5 years, an iconic brand that I grew up with. So I jumped at the chance to work and help get under the skin of Virgin. It was a real big jump to go client side, but it was an incredible experience. And then Virgin Red, which is the business I referenced at the top of this at the podcast, they were building this business out, and they said, would you like to get involved and interested with that? So kind of here we are 20 years later, working on a loyalty program when I started out as a research analyst in Hull, and all the sort of facets of the journey in between. It's kind of really, really odd journey. And I didn't really plan to get to this point, but I think I just took the opportunities that came up and really just didn't try not to think too much about them. That was a long-winded way of saying this is how I got here.
I love it. I think it was fair to say that it definitely wasn't a traditional approach. And I think what really strikes me about your story is that sense of adventure all the way through, that you have been kind of driven by other people sort of wanting you to join in their agencies and everything. And it's definitely not traditional. I absolutely love your story.
It's a funny one. I try to look back on it, and it's very rare only when somebody asks me to talk about it that I think, it is slightly odd, but I think it's just driven from passion and really not wanting to settle for what's in front of you, and then just taking the chances as they come. The themes are taking chances as they come, whether it's disappearing off around the world when we had a mortgage, we had a dog, we had sold the car, and then realizing that actually, you can get all these things again, you can do all these things again, but you can't get the chance again. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's definitely wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
I bet. So let's go back a little further and have a chat about what led up to all that. So we'll start with Lee the child, if that's okay. So what were you like when you were little?
I was little, very little, that's for sure. And I'm still little, but I grew up in Liverpool, a really sort of typical working class background in Liverpool. I was a happy kid. Early upbringing was fun. We had a full house when I was really young. The neighbours were always round. And I don't know why, but we had a Wurlitzer in the house. We weren't rich, we were a typical working class, but for some reason we had an old Wurlitzer in the house. And I think this is where the music thing stemmed from.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my dad used to fill this Wurlitzer up with old 45s that he used to get from the pub around the corner. So when the pub would change their 45s, he'd get the batch from the landlord. They'd put the new records onto the Wurlitzer, and then all the old Wurlitzer bits of vinyl I'd take up to my room. And I think that's where all the music stuff stemmed from. So it was a fun house. It was a loud house. I was always in the pub with my dad, and everything. We're listening to everything from Motown to Prince to early electronica like Kraftwerk, and I was 10 years old, 11 years old, so I had no idea. So that's where it all sort of stemmed from, I think.
And when you were growing up, what did you want to be? At that stage, did you already want to be a DJ, for example?
No, absolutely not. If I'm honest with you, I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Awesome.
And where that stemmed from was watching too much Top Gun when I shouldn't have been watching it at the age of 11 in 1986. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and that's all I wanted to do. I'd watched it loads. I was always the smallest kid in school, so I had no chance of being a pilot. No chance.
But Tom Cruise,
Maybe that's where my inspiration was. I had some other things which I wanted to live in a pub. I don't think that was what I wanted to be, but I wanted to live in a pub. I don't know why. My dad used to take me round to the pub with him when we were younger. It was a different world in the 80s, you know. He used to put me on the bar and sit me in the bar at the age of 7 and 8 while he was having a drink with all his fans. So I just knew that I didn't want to get stuck doing something I didn't like. And that was kind of my principle, really. I never did get to be a fighter pilot, but hey-ho.
There's still time.
I hope so.
And it sounds like you've worked with some pretty incredible people over the years. Is there anyone in particular who's influenced you in your career?
It's a really good question. I was looking when we were talking about the sort of things for this session. I was really thinking back on those individuals that have helped steer me or influenced. And I think when I was really early on in my career, I think it was a case of less individuals and more everything that was going on around me. People doing stuff that they really didn't like doing was a big motivation for me. I thought, I don't really want to do that. You know, there has to be more to it. And then as I got into my ad career, there were some really key people. One I've referenced earlier was a guy called Mark Collier, who was the original founder of Dare, and a lady called Claire Hines, who was my boss. She is now the co-founder of Mr. President in London, and another lady called Nadia Powell. They were all sort of key influences on me when I was at Dare. And then I guess more recently, it was a guy called Christian Purser. He's a CEO in London at an ad agency now, and somebody called Lisa Thomas, who again I've referenced in this call, the founder of Leader, you know, a CEO of M&T Saatchi Group. I've just been really blessed. They've all been willing to be there for me personally and professionally. And as a tiny side story to just, you know, talking about genuine humans and the subject of this podcast is a story that I never really tell, but it was 2007. And this is a really personal story. In 2007, I got really sick, and I was at a barbecue, ironically, at Nadia Powell's house in Forest Hill, and I think it was a Saturday, and I thought to myself, I don't feel too good. It was in the back garden. Next thing you know, I woke up 3 days later in hospital, and I'd had a hemorrhage. It was really crazy. This really incredible moment in time, and just a pure random thing. I'd had a hemorrhage, and the subsequent 6 months were me being in hospital, recovering from this hemorrhage. I lost my eyesight, couldn't see. I wasn't with my wife then. This is before I met my wife, so I was in a flat in Camberwell. The reason I'm telling this story is that Mark Collier and the agency Dare said it doesn't matter what Lee needs, we will sort it out and we will help him. We will get him better and we'll see him through it, and his job will be here when he gets back. Wow. So in the subject of genuine humans, that was an incredible period, incredible year in 2007 where he came to the hospital, Mark Collier, a few people came, everybody rallied around in the agency. All of them washed my pants at some point because I couldn't see. So they all came around my flat and washed my pants. And it's a funny story now, but it was incredibly odd year. And those are the people, the Mark Colliers, the Claire Hines, the Nadia Powell, who all helped me get back on my feet. Where you realize that, you know, you meet these people, and some people are just, you know, they make a massive impact and they make a massive difference in your life. So although it's a slightly odd story, there's a happy ending. You know, there's definitely happy, because here I am. You know, it's all good, but very strange year. And when you talk about genuine humans, that I've met, I've been very blessed to meet quite a few of them in my time who've helped along the way. So yeah, an odd story. I never planned to tell that story, but there you go.
Well, it's an incredible story. Yeah, I mean, and no wonder that they're coming out as those really influential people. Are you okay now?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you know, I had to wear some really odd glasses for a year, which looked like milk bottles on the end while I was correcting my sight and stuff like that. But 100%, you'd never know. You know, you'd never know. It was just, yeah, a very strange year, but also was the catalyst for me moving to New York. It was one of those things where you're sort of sat thinking, oh God, you know, I need to do these things that I said I was going to do. I need to move to New York. So Dare helped me get to New York, you know, a year and a half later to fulfill that ambition and everything else. So yeah, you know, you just, out of adversity and out of strange times come opportunities, and, you know, and all those kind of things.
And the sign of great culture within that agency as well, that you know, it's something that I like to think that we do as well at the agency, but it's putting people first is so important.
Honestly, I always reference that in every team I'm lucky enough to put together, or any team I'm lucky enough to work in. Just think back of those things when, you know, when people need you most, or when times get tough, how you respond and how you react. And I always use that period in time as a benchmark for how it could and should be done.
And what are you most proud of in your career?
That's also a really good question. I think it's sticking to my principles, not giving up. Definitely are things I talk about a lot. I have this phrase which it's a slightly profanity, but it's really simple. It's just don't be a dick. And I stick with that. Invest in people, invest in relationships. I'm proud of the time at Dare, because that was, we got them to agency of the decade, and I was part of that, the campaign agency of the decade sort of phase, growing our little agency, and managing to sell that, and then and launching Virgin Red most recently. I'm really, really proud of all of those. Really, I'm lucky. They've had so many incredible points in time, but I think sticking to my principles, not giving up, I think are probably the key things.
Brilliant.
I'm going to bring us back more to the brands now as well, because I think everything that you've done will have had an influence on the brands as you've gone along. But thinking about any brand you've worked with, and obviously you've worked brand side and agency side, what's been the biggest transformation that you've seen?
When I had that little agency called Parata with the four other guys, we were lucky enough to get a call. I think it was 2011 from the British Olympic Association. This was pre-2012 Olympics, and they'd been trying to build the brand up of Team GB and everything else, and it wasn't a brand that was well known, Team GB at the time, and it wasn't in the conscience of the public. And we all remember fondly how amazing Team GB was, post 2012. It became a beacon of hope and pride and excitement, and afterwards. Yeah. But we got a call, I think it was Christmas, just before Christmas 2011, saying the agency that's going to build this global website for Team GB, it's not happening. We need to get this thing out the door by April. That this deadline's not moving. So I think the biggest transformation I've seen is how the British Olympic Association really assembled itself with Team GB to become a brand which was not only a sports team, but it became this kind of pin-up for pride and British hope and everything else. And, the rest is history in terms of what we did at Team GB and how often, it came up. But it was just, the athletes did all the hard work, but building the brand from not really being known to being a household name and transforming itself into something that's still, 9 years on, still stands at the test of time and everything else. So it was a phenomenal brand building exercise and something I think was the British Olympic Association did an amazing job turning that around and making it what it was. So I think that's probably one of the most amazing ones I've seen that I've been part of.
I love that. I also noticed that this must have been part of the brand building that you helped with as well, that there was a lot more linking between Team GB and the business world as well. And in fact, I remember, Wendy will remember this, we became quite obsessed about the cycling team, the women's cycling team. In fact, just the GB cycling team generally, but their obsession with incremental changes and how that would, we kind of talked a lot about how that impacts the business, even down to the level of whether they should shave or not when they're cycling, because it had an impact on their cycling. And I was just obsessed. So yeah, thank you for the work you did on that.
Oh no, we just played a small part in it. And I think the story around the 1%, there's that kind of issue of just changing things 1% has a profound force multiplier effect. So no, I know, again, another incredible experience and something, I look back on fondly.
And I mentioned about you working brand side and agency side. I love asking this question, but what is the biggest difference that you've noticed?
I was really nervous when I moved over to brand side. I having spent all those years in agencies, being exposed to different agencies and different clients, I think in my experience, there's probably three key things which are different. And I think number one is the pace. Number two is the detail. And number three is the ownership. And I think there are the obvious things that most people who've moved from agencies over to brand will say is the pace. Things move slower. They move slower on the brand side, and it takes a while to work out why that is. You can have that immediate frustration of why is it taking so long? In agencies we just clip, we get it done quickly. So that was the first thing, and then the second thing around detail is kind of C.1. There's so much more of it when you're deep into the business and in the fabric of everything in the brand. So that detail becomes the thing which makes the pace a bit slower, and then which leads to kind of point three, I guess, which is the ownership. So when you've got an account, and you will both know this from owning your own agency, when you've got an account at an agency, it's all about the relationship with the client that you build. And if you get a really strong, trusting relationship with that client, you can do amazing things. But you never truly get close to the brand, in my view. You're always the client is always the sort of piece between you getting really close to the brand. So you never really own it. But when you're client side, it's all in your hands, and it's your investment, and it takes on a totally different meaning. And that's that kind of, so pace, the detail, and the ownership are the three things which are definitely different from a brand side to agency side, for sure.
Definitely. I would say that ask any agency owner, and the biggest compliment they could be given by a brand is if the brand says that they feel like you're an extension of their team.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, now I talk about if you can, that agency just becomes part of that brand team or part of that product team. You're onto a winner, and those ones you look back on fondly over your agency careers is where you genuinely, that became real, and you do your best work, and everybody, the businesses, both sides make the financials they need to prop it up, and you get awards off the back of them. So
now we've mentioned genuine humans, and we're all about creating genuine human connections, but how do you create connections between Virgin and your customers?
So Virgin's been around for 50 years. I think last year was our 50th year, and it's a shame we never really made a little bit more of it, but obviously things changed, the climate changed, and obviously this awful pandemic we're in changed things. But we've been around for 50 years, and I think the reason how Virgin connects with its customers is, I think a lot of the values that Virgin has are relatable. So those values that the brand stands up for, that Richard Branson started in 1970, 71, around it being simple and witty and honest and surprisingly delightful and all those kind of things, and being a transparent brand. So Richard and the family have been really open about what the business stands for, and what Holly stands for and Sam stands for, and telling stories. They've always told stories behind the brand. Richard is one of the original architects of stories and opening up a brand to customers beyond the product. So, for me, I grew up reading his books at university and everything else. Before the Musks and the Zuckerbergs and everything else, he was the original entrepreneur. So, we're really lucky to have a founder like Richard, who is active and is deep into the business and everything else. But I think it's about just being honest, transparent, having values that people can relate to. Not always easy, it doesn't always work, but I think that's why Virgin has always had a place in a lot of people's hearts over the years, and why people have naturally been, attracted to the brand, whether it's shopping or just being immersed in it.
Great answer. Thank you. What's your biggest priority for the year ahead?
Number one, I guess, is to just get through it. I think is it next week or the week after, I've been working from home for a year.
Yeah.
And although I've worked from home on and off for a while, having this consistently has been tough. So the biggest priority is to just have a successful year and get through it healthy and well. But most importantly, from a work perspective, is to grow Virgin Red. It's very timely that we have this conversation. We took the beta shutters off this week, and we've now got the general public coming into the app. So I want to make it famous. Myself and all the team want to make it famous. We're going to create another Virgin brand that people love and find useful in their everyday life, and create that touch point for the brand. I want to have fun. I want to scale the ambition that we've got, have the best rewards program in the world eventually. And then, as I said, for Sarah and I, my wife, to stay physically and mentally held, to stay motivated, to try and come out the other side of this with a real appreciation of how lucky we are, really, and how fortunate we are, and to just not try to dwell on it, just learn from this year as well. It sounds very cliched, I know, but it's an opportunity to really just reassess everything when we come out the other side of this. How will the public react? Will they go crazy like the Roaring Twenties? And off the back of the Spanish flu pandemic, where everybody went crazy and we had the Roaring Twenties, or will we take a totally different look on the world? And it's going to be interesting to see. But no, I'm really excited. But Virgin Red, growing it, scaling it, and staying healthy, I think.
Yeah, that balance is absolutely key.
Not easy.
No.
Now, how would you define your leadership style?
Yeah, I think this stays the same each time I answer it. But I would say it's one of being open. I definitely want to be open with my team, let them know what we're doing, over communicating, talking to the team, being inclusive, bringing everybody on the journey with me. Caring, I would say it's caring. I like to put an arm around the team and make sure they're okay. I'm definitely not one of those people who stands on the soapbox and dictates what needs to happen. And I take loads of pride in building a team that is having fun and succeeds. I've always said, when you build a team, I love to put people who are around me who are better than, smarter than me. And I don't think that's something you should be scared of saying. I think that's the whole point of a good leader. You get people who doing the right thing in the right place and making a career for them. So I'd say it's one of openness and just involving people.
Have you found that you've been influenced by other leaders, or do you have like a kind of a go-to business book or something?
Just a few, I've there's one that I keep going back to, which is a book by a chap called Cal Newport. It's called Deep Thinking, and I've spent sort of 20 years racing at the speed of light on stuff, and this book has given me a new sort of thought on his principle of you have to do good work. It takes time. And you have to, your deep thinking produces the best results. So trying to find moments where you box off time to do the really heavy strategic stuff. If you snatch at it, the output will be the same. So in terms of books, that is a book I always go back to. There's another book called The Culture Code by Dan Coyle, which is a brilliant book, which is about sort of understanding how that all fits together. And then in terms of leaders, I don't know, I think I've been lucky enough to sponge the way people do it. Mark Collier, probably, I keep going back to him, but I think he made a massive impression on me in sort of 2006, 2007. And the way he built that agency, he grew it to an incredibly massive agency. It had huge clients, and he never became somebody that wasn't approachable or people didn't want to work for. And I don't think that's easy. It's not an easy thing to do when you've got to make tough decisions as a business owner, and you'll know this only too well running your agency. So no, I think I've sponged a little bit off everything. But yeah, the Cal Newport book, Deep Thinking, and The Culture Code by Dan Coyle are two I definitely go back to when I need a bit of help.
Brilliant. And we talked about the pandemic and working from home. It's not easy. How have you been focusing on culture and team collaboration?
Well, it started off probably the same as you guys, which is we did Zooms every week, and we had drinks on a Friday, and we did quizzes, and fatigue set in, and it's very difficult when you can't have that conversation in the corridor and just check in on everything. So for me, I'm over communicating. I'm telling teams more than they might need to know, and sometimes you don't get that response back. It's very difficult through the screen, but just keep over communicating, keep telling the team what's going on. Regular check-ins, even if it's 2 minutes, it doesn't have to be a video call. It could just be a phone call. Just check in, make sure they're all right. Encourage people to stick their arm up, stick their hand up if they need some support. Still trying to do coffee mornings. So a couple of my team, we do coffee mornings where 8:45, my assistant Jilly, it's incredible, and everybody's situation is different, but we have an 8:45 coffee check-in where she updates me on the best box sets that she's watched this week, and I scribble them down and stuff. It's just those moments, where you're maybe not talking about work, you maybe just having a chat. It's hard. It's really, really hard. You've got to, as a leader or somebody who's running a team, you've just got to keep communicating, keep checking in, keep seeing everyone's all right. Look for the signs, of people, and just and try to be positive. We have to be positive, but also acknowledge when it's not easy. Lean into it, acknowledge it, and just see how you can help. It's difficult, isn't it? And I'm sure you're both experiencing it as well.
I think the key there is mixing it up a bit. Totally agree with that. That what people were finding useful 6 months ago, they may not be finding useful now. And so, you just have to keep listening to what people are saying and get their feedback of what they need. And everyone needs different things. You've got people trying to balance children at home and homeschooling. And you've got people who are living by themselves and just, really feeling quite a bit lonely. So there are so many needs.
There are, and I've got parents in my team. I've got individuals who are house sharing. I've got individuals who are on their own, and not one size doesn't fit all. So it's just trying to understand that work is work, and a family and everything else is at home, and the challenges with the children are real. And when we got the call a few weeks ago saying that the schools are closing, I could see individuals on my team thinking, I don't know how we're going to get through this bit. This is going to be really, really tough. But we're getting through it. We're trying to do what we can, saying to some of the team who are parents, 9 till 11, you don't work. You focus on the kids and you get them set up, and you will pick up when we need to pick up, but box those time off, because it's really easy to miss those bits. But yeah, it's tough. It is tough, but we're getting through it.
So we're going to move on to the final part of the podcast now, and we're going to get a bit more personal. So we'll start with, what's your guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasures. I guess I've got two. One of them is trainers. I'm obsessed with sneakers and trainers. So My wife will tell you, it's just I'm lucky enough to have a section in the room which is just full of trainers. So I collect all sorts of trainers, from Blazers, Nike Blazers to Jordan Air Sixes. I'm just obsessed with trainers at the moment. And like any 40-something-year-old man, I'm still obsessed with video games.
Awesome.
Yeah, still obsessed with video games. It stems from my childhood.
So what's your favourite game at the moment?
So I've got a Nintendo Switch, and I'm still playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and yeah, I'm still playing The Witcher. I sound like a right nerd, but yeah, I find it as my solace. When you just need a respite and everything else, I pick up the Nintendo Switch and play it. My wife just goes, "Do you know what? Whatever keeps him happy."
And so what's your idea of a perfect weekend?
Perfect weekend. It would be a slow start. I think if you ask me right now, it might be different from 2 years ago, but it's definitely a slow start on a Saturday. Maybe a coffee in bed if I'm feeling that, with Sarah and our pooch Norma with us. Maybe a nice walk in the afternoon, because we're close to the Peak District where I live. So trying to get out in the peaks. If I could, I'd go to the cinema in the evening. I love movies. That's another sort of guilty pleasure. Maybe Sunday morning, a bacon naan roll from Dishoom, something like that would be ideal. Tinkering on the house, because I'm obsessed with automation, smart home stuff, Internet of Things. So I'm always messing with that, much to Sarah's dismay. And there's always music on, always got music on. The house has got Sonos all over the place. Again, drive my wife mad with the music on. So that would be a perfect weekend, I think.
I think I'm struggling to get past the bit about your dog being called Norma.
Yeah,
I love that.
It always strikes a chord, especially when you go. We've had this over the years when we're out in the park, we're going through, and somebody sat on a bench. We had a couple of times. Will say, it'll be a lady that'll say, it's on this occasion, "Oh, your dog's lovely. What's the dog's name?" And I'll say, "It's Norma," and then they'll say, "Oh, that's my name." and what we don't want to tell them is the reason we call her Norma is because she looks like a little old lady. So,
Right.
so yeah, she's called Norma.
Let's carry on with the geeky stuff. What app couldn't you live without?
So this is going to be pretty obvious. I couldn't live with the Alexa app, and it's less about the voice control on it and more about the automation aspects that Alexa does. So I used to be obsessed with an app called If This Then That, which allows you to link apps together to create services and automation. And I've switched everything to Alexa, so I love it. It basically powers everything in a house, from turning on the lights to turning on cameras to turning the TV on, through to entering a room with the temperature and all this kind of stuff. So I love it. I love the Alexa app for its automation. I know it's a bit nerdy.
If you could have, no, nothing wrong with nerdy. I'm a fellow nerd. If you could invent something, what would it be?
This is totally ridiculous, but do you know what it'd be? It would be, and you can see this, but people who are listening can't. It would be a never-ending cup of tea that stayed at the perfect temperature. I'm a northern lad, so the right color, the right Pantone color. If I can invent a cup of tea, bottomless cup of tea that stayed the same temperature, heaven.
I'd buy it. And if you had an extra hour each day, what do you think you'd do with it?
I hope this doesn't sound corny. Do you know what? I'd spend it with Sarah. It sounds really corny, but she has been so patient with my randomness and my desire to tinker and chase interesting things that are happening, that I owe that spare hour that you're gifting me. I owe it to Sarah to just, laptop down, phone down, just hang out with Sarah. I know it's a bit cheesy, but that's definitely what I'd do.
It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. And I wish I could gift you that hour for real.
Amazing if you could.
And how do you think your friends would describe you?
Lucky, I think. And I have that conversation with quite a lot of people where the phrase is now, I think you have to learn to be lucky. I think my friends would say I'm lucky. I'd agree with them. I've had a few close shaves, and I've had a few of those sliding doors moments where I've taken a decision and it's worked out. And there's been loads that haven't. Just to be clear, there's been a lot that haven't as well. They would say I'm probably caring, small. Everybody says I'm small. I've learned to deal with it. I'm small. And they would say late. It's a trait that I absolutely hate, but have to admit I'm late. I tend to be late for things, and it's my worst trait. So they'd say lucky, he's quite small, he's very caring, and he's always bloody late.
Would they say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
I would say extrovert, but not in a loud way. Not in somebody who stands on a chair and declares himself in the room. But I'm definitely an extrovert. I love meeting people. I love listening to stories. I love finding out about people. So if we go to a room or a party, or I enjoy introducing myself to people and saying hello and stuff like that. But so extrovert, but definitely not in a shouty way, I hope.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I think there's probably a lot of us would say time travel. I would love to have time travel as a superpower, to go and see some of those things in history, those moments in history, not necessarily to change what I've done or to affect my outcome, because I don't think I'd ever change that, but just to see some of those amazing history. Time travel every day. It probably stems from my love of Back to the Future and 80s movies, I think.
With a bit of Doctor Who TARDIS thing going on in there, perhaps?
That'd be amazing, yeah. That'd be awesome. Yeah, I'd love that. Sonic screwdriver to boot, that'd be incredible.
Lee, we're coming to the end, but is there anything that you wish that we had asked you, or do you want to end with any closing thoughts?
I'd just say, first things first, it's a privilege to be asked to chat on a podcast like this, especially with it being called Genuine Humans. You don't make it easy with that. When you said Genuine Humans, I was like, oh my goodness, how on earth are they? Why did they want to talk to me? So no, it's a privilege to talk on a podcast called Genuine Humans. My story is incredibly random. It has threads through it, which are the things to sort of for people to hook onto. I'm sure it's not unique, but it's definitely random. And for anybody starting out, my advice and my thoughts on this, given it's about Genuine Humans, is to play the long game, invest in relationships, don't take the quick option at someone else's expense. I've seen it done, and you can get places quicker, but it doesn't play into the idea of playing the long game. And things, if you're in this industry, advertising or brand, people get to know each other and everything else. So play the long game. And if you're considered well into your career, like I am, I guess at my age, keep an eye out for Genuine Humans. And if you see them and you find them, add them to your team, add them to your business, add them to your friendship circle if you're lucky, and you will not regret it.
You've been listening to Genuine Humans, brought to you by The Social Element. If you loved what you heard, remember to subscribe, or you can find out more at www.thesocialelement.agency.